Hey everybody, it's me, Stephanie, and it is November 5th, 2020. This year is both the longest year and it is going by the slowest all at one time. This is take 2 of my video. I did not like the first one. That is why I'm mid-makeup application. Speaking of which, this is not a makeup tutorial. I am not going to be walking through step by step telling you what I'm doing because the point of these videos is not the makeup. Today, we will be discussing the election. As of this recording, which is happening around 10 o'clock in the morning, we do not yet have a winner for the general election, specifically for the office of the presidency. We are still waiting. It looks like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to prevail. They are going to be victorious. And I'm happy about that. I'm very happy about that. But the tension, the stress of waiting is really getting to me. So I'm here today making this video, hoping to share a little bit of that. No, not share the stress. I shouldn't say that, but hoping to find some or offer some comfort to those who are like-minded and are just really stressed out about the potential of 4 more years of the nightmare we've been living. If you're here today because you are looking for a fun video, a video that's not serious, I don't know that this is going to be it. We will have our moments, we will have fun, we will laugh, but the things I want to talk about today are pretty dang serious. Pretty dang serious. Because I want to talk about what I have learned about people, not only through this election, but just through the last 4 years. I still remember very clearly when Donald Trump won. I remember the devastation. I remember feeling like I just had the wind knocked out of me because I couldn't believe what just happened. I could not believe that enough people thought that man was capable of the job that they voted for him. And the reason I couldn't believe it was because he is just such a truly terrible human being. Forget how he is as a president. Forget that, because in 2016, nobody really knew. He was just a terrible person. And I couldn't believe that anybody who considers themselves a decent human being could look at that man and say, yes, he is who I want to have represent me. And so there was a season, and it was a long one, of thinking that maybe people just didn't know, maybe they didn't understand, how terrible he was. And that's why they didn't have any qualms about voting for him. Maybe they just didn't see who he was. Well, let me tell you, in the last 4 years, I have come to understand that no, the people who vote for him in 2016 and 2020, they knew exactly who he was. It was no mystery to them. And the reason I think that's important is because a lot of his supporters are white evangelical Christians. In 2016, between 80 and 85% of self-identified white evangelical Christians voted for Donald Trump. This year, I recall reading it's around 76%, somewhere in there. It was shocking to me that these people who had raised me to live with integrity, to let my yes be yes and my no be no, to always take care of the least of these, to take care of marginalized people, to prefer others ahead of myself, to look after the sick and the poor, to really be an asset to the world around me, not just somebody who has ideas that I think everyone else needs to follow. No, it wasn't enough to just have the right ideas about things. You need, it was always emphasized to me, you need to be a person who lives their beliefs, who You know, people shouldn't even have to, what I was told that, people shouldn't even have to ask you if you're a Christian, because your life should demonstrate that. It should never be a question. And if somebody, the question we were always given back then was, if you were to be put on trial for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Now, some of that had to do with your actual evangelism, your quote witness. But some of that also had to do with, what kind of a life are you living? Are you living a life where people will look at you and say, I see Jesus in your life? And so that was always a challenge that we were given. And when I say we, I mean, you know, me and other young people at the time. And so it never occurred to me that, you know, 30 years later, a lot of the same people who taught me that would be casting their vote for a man who embodies the exact opposite of everything they told me was important. So the feeling of betrayal was real, and it was devastating. But I thought, you know what? We're here now, so I'm just going to trust that over time, people are going to see who he is, and come 2020, these people will by then have realized they made a mistake, and they will vote accordingly. So imagine how it felt to watch these people, every time he said or did anything horrible, double down and insist that no, he was God's chosen person, and God would not have put him in power if he wasn't the right person for the job. And there was grief. There is a level of grief and a sense of betrayal. It's like, now hold up. This is not what you taught me. This is not what you told me mattered. And then what really just blew my mind was when the defense of that was to say, I didn't hire a pastor, I hired a president. Because in past administrations, if there was any moral corruption of any kind, it was said that the person was unfit to be president. But all of a sudden with Donald Trump, you have this man who is everything terrible, and suddenly none of that matters because they hired a president, not a pastor. So as the years went on, and I just saw more and more of the hypocrisy of people doubling down and insisting that he was a good man and he had good intentions, even though everything about his behavior said otherwise. I really felt a sense of loss. I felt that I had been betrayed by people I should have been able to trust. I had been lied to my entire life about what was important. And the things that I was told were important actually are important to me. But it became really clear that those things weren't as important to the people who taught me those things, because if adhering to those standards meant giving up some of your political power, then they weren't going to do it. So it has been a really difficult 4 years. And now in 2020, I'm seeing that people have said, hey, you know what? These last 4 years were so great. Let's do it again. And that really, I'm trying to make sense of that. I mean, like, in some way I can understand, you know, intellectually, I understand that this is who they are. That's not ever going to change. This is who they've chosen to be. But at the same time, there's still a sense of awe that anybody who considers themselves a good and decent person could want to align themselves with such a man. It really just boggles my mind. And I don't understand there's got to be a heck of a lot of cognitive dissonance there to be able to say, I'm a good and decent human being, but I'm going to support this person who is clearly not a good and decent human being. And so I've been thinking, why is this? How are they able to intellectually justify this? And the only thing I can come up with is they do not want their power threatened. And I don't just mean their political power. I mean the privilege they have in their everyday lives. They do not want that threatened. And if we're being honest, it also has to do with the fact that, you know, people are really fucking racist. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I think that electing Donald Trump was revenge for having 8 years of under a black president. And I think that the reason he is so popular is because he is blatantly racist. When you have got the endorsement of the Ku Klux Klan, there's no more skirting around it. You are a known white supremacist. And white supremacists love you. And they don't love people who are willing to really advocate for racial equality and unity and an America that really is free and just and fair for everyone. No. The United States of America, since its founding, has been a deeply racist country. Our founders enslaved people. Our founders, you know, stole land. Our founders made sure that in our founding documents that indigenous people were referred to as savages and that enslaved Africans were considered less than full human beings. So there's no denying that the founding of our country has deeply racist roots. And until we acknowledge that as a whole, as a country, we're not going to ever move past it. There is no unity on the horizon. There is no true equality on the horizon until we really come to grips with the...
Yo, what is going on?
My son just got home. Hi, Jaden. Until we come to grips with the fact that a lot of our roots are racist, we're not going to ever be able to move forward into true equality. And if I've learned anything in the last 4 years, it is that there are a lot of people who are more than fine with that.
Wait, what?
Okay, I had to pause for a second. So anyway, so I really think that we are at a place, we're at a crossroads. We have to decide what kind of a country we're going to be. We have to decide, you know, one thing I really get tired of hearing. So in the last 4 years, there have been a lot of things that have been happening that every time something happens, a chorus of people will chime in with, "This is not who we are." When news about what was happening at the southern border, with families being separated and children being kept from their parents and so forth, you know, a lot of people were like, "This is not who we are." Well, I have news for you. Everything that's been happening the last 4 years is representative of exactly who we are. And by we, I'm speaking specifically to white people. I'm speaking specifically to white America. And people will say, well, there is no black or white America. There's only one America. Well, no, there actually isn't. It's one country, but there is no unity. And the difference in experiences between what white Americans experience and what non-white Americans experience, it's very different. So yes, it might be one country, but there is no unity, and it is almost like there are a few different Americas depending on who you are. So anyway, so people would chime in with things like, that is not who we are. It is, though. America has a long history of separating families. This is nothing new. And, you know, this insistence that this is not who we are comes up every time a new atrocity comes to light. And people want to really believe that. People want to sincerely believe that these terrible things that are happening do not reflect who we are as a country and who we are as people, and are deeply unwilling to acknowledge that these things that are happening, these horrible things that make the news, they're exactly who we are. We have been doing this for centuries. And it's nothing new. It's nothing that should be that shocking. And yet, every single time, people act like it caught them by surprise. And there are, you know, this election has shown that there are people who are deeply committed to continuing that. They do not want to move forward. They don't want to live in a country where white people do not have this level of power that we have right now. And I think that's the reality of it. And I think it's a reality we need to really be honest about, because until we're honest about it, we can't do anything about it. And I'm tired of hearing white people say, this is not who we are, this is not representative of this country, etc., etc. We have to get real. This election has got a lot of white people worried. This election is the first time I can ever remember, the first time in my lifetime anyway, that I have seen white people truly terrified that the results of an election are going to have some say in whether or not they're treated as valuable human beings, whether or not their humanity is going to be questioned when it's over. However, this is the experience for a lot of people for every single election. This anxiety we're feeling, this fear of wondering if, when everything is said and done, are we still going to be living in a country that allows us to be fully human, fully ourselves? If we're not white, cisgender, and straight and Christian, are we still going to be allowed to exist as human beings with full agency over ourselves? That is a first for a lot of white people to have to ask that question. Whereas a lot of people of color, this is what they ask every single election. This anxiety that they're feeling is with them every single time there's an election. And that has been a sobering reality for me. I have had to really come to grips with the fact that I have lived such a privileged life. To have come this far, I'm 45 years old, to have come this far in life and never really had to question whether or not my humanity was going to be up for debate, depending on who's in office, is such an unbelievable amount of privilege. And for this is the first election that I have wondered, when this is over, is my humanity going to be up for debate? I am a disabled single mom. I'm bisexual. I have got a lot of things that this administration, the current administration, has made very clear. They do not value me as a full and complete human being because of these various aspects of my life. So I've been terrified. I don't know what's going to happen. And then I asked someone who is black, is this how you feel every election? And he said yes. And it's one thing to know it intellectually. Like, for several days I've been thinking, wow, this must be what, say, black Americans have felt with every election, since forever. It's one thing to kind of know that. It's another thing to have it said to you from someone who, and that's their lived experience. Because I know that the last several days, the last few weeks, but especially the last few days, have been incredibly stressful, waiting to find out the fate of our entire country. And if it's been hard for me for one election, I can't imagine going through this election after election after election. And I think that speaks to the fact that white people carry so very much privilege, and we don't even realize it. We don't realize how much we are spared just by being white. And if you're white, cisgender, and straight, even better. And that brings me to another point. I have heard over the last 4 years a lot of people saying regarding marginalized groups, particularly people of color, why don't you get over it? Speaking of black Americans who have rightly pointed out that the effects of slavery are still with us, or with, especially in their community. The effects of slavery are still with white people too, but in good ways. We have benefited greatly from the foundations that were laid during the years that the United States allowed for humans to enslave other human beings. But the effects of slavery are still with the black community in different ways, in ways that are very harmful. So asking somebody, why don't you just get over it? is asking them to deny their lived experience. It's asking them to say, to pretend that what they experienced didn't really happen. I never have to worry when I go out that if I'm stopped by a cop, I might not make it home. I might not get out of that situation alive. That never crosses my mind. And yet, this year, and in previous years, but this year, we have learned, or at least we have been told, that for many Black Americans, that is their day in and day out fear, that if they encounter a police officer, they are not going to walk away from the situation. They are going to die. I have seen people in crisis who reached out to various social media platforms for help because they were in a situation that was bad for one reason or another, and they were reaching out to their friends on their social media platform, and being Black, they said, please don't call the cops, because if you call the cops, they're going to kill me. Now, how sad is it that when you are in a situation where maybe an officer might help, you have to decide, I am not going to call for help, because if I do, they might kill me. Even if you've done nothing wrong, just for existing, your life is in danger. I can't imagine living that way. I can't imagine what that feels like, and I'm not going to attempt to describe it because I don't know. But what I do know is, as those things came to light over the summer, there were a whole lot of white people who insisted that it wasn't really that bad, that these are people who are just trying to hurt Donald Trump, that if they would just comply, that they would be able to walk away from these situations with that, and have no fear in the midst of these situations. Even though that is demonstrably false. We even have on video people who complied and were still killed. So this is the day in and day out lived experience of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And yet, this Trump-supporting base will insist their lived experiences don't count for as much as my assumptions of their lived experiences. And this is what happens every election. People have to worry that their lived experience as, say, a Black person in America, a queer person in America, a transgender person in America, is going to count for less than some straight, white, heterosexual male's opinion of their experiences. And I said men for a reason. It's because a lot of white conservative women just do what the men in their lives tell them they need to do as far as who to vote for. So that is why I didn't say white conservative, or heterosexual straight women. It's because in that culture, and I came from that culture, I know that men are typically the ones who call the shots on these things. So here we are again, another election being decided, another election in which there are a lot of people in the country not sure what their fate is going to be, and there are a lot of people who are, the audacity of saying, nothing is going to change for me no matter who is elected, so I don't care, or it doesn't matter if we elect Trump or Biden, my life is going to be fine. The amount of privilege wrapped up in that is significant. And as white Americans, we really need to be looking at the kind of stuff we're saying. Because in saying what happens with this election is not going to change is not going to affect anything, you're erasing a lot of marginalized communities that are telling you, have been saying for years, elections have consequences, and they have real consequences in my life. And if you are the ally you say you are, if you are the friend you say you are, if you are my family member who loves me the way you say you do, please be mindful about who you vote for, because those votes have consequences for my life. Which brings me to my next point. There is a lot of talk right now about the virtue of rebuilding relationships after this election. Like people that you have not had a lot to do with the last few years because you did not appreciate how they voted and so forth. Now it's time to rebuild the bridge. Now it's time to lay that all aside. It's in the past, and we can all move forward together in unity. I do not see why it's considered a virtue to overlook to overlook someone dehumanizing you. I don't see why a call for unity is being given more weight than a call for accountability. I get that we can't just walk away from every person in our lives who might not agree with us politically. However, I don't see this as a political issue. I see this as a moral issue. If you have got somebody in your life who spent the last 4 years dehumanizing you by supporting a man who has tried to take away your rights, take away your dignity, has considered you more of a problem to be dealt with than a citizen of the United States who deserves good leadership as much as other citizens of the United States, how in the world does this election change that? By asking people to, lay all that aside and come together now and just forget the last 4 years, that's a big thing to ask for. You're saying that a person's experience of being dehumanized by people who said they loved them is less important than the facade of unity that can be achieved by just forgetting these horrible things ever happened. I gotta be honest, I don't know how we move forward, first of all, as a country, but even in our personal relationships, knowing what we know about people now. Because if the last 4 years gave us any gift, it was the gift of having the facade removed. It was the gift of people showing us exactly who they are. And I don't know how we get beyond that. I really don't. I don't think it's reasonable to ask people to just forget that, to ask people to forget that people in their lives who said they loved them also supported an administration whose policies were specifically designed to dehumanize them. I'm not sure how you move past that. I don't know what relationships with people like that look like from this time forward. There are some people that you can cut out of your life easily enough, and it's not a big deal. Other people, not so much. What does it look like to continue a relationship with those people because you don't really have much of an option? Or maybe you're choosing to be in a relationship with them because maybe they're your family or your friends and you really love them and don't want to be without them, but you also can't forget what you saw. What does that look like going forward? I honestly don't know. It is interesting to me, though, that in every situation, it is the oppressed who is being asked to just forgive and forget. Never the oppressor who's being told you're going to be held accountable for what you did. It's always the oppressed that has to be the one to meet in the middle and make compromises, not the oppressor. And, I remember when Botham Jean was he was killed in his apartment by Amber Geiger. And I remember when Botham Jean's brother decided to publicly forgive his brother's murderer. And he hugged her and so forth. And people, especially the white people, loved it. They couldn't say enough good things about that. And I thought, well, this is very odd. Rather than celebrating that somebody who murdered another human being is being held accountable and going to prison, they're celebrating the fact that the brother of the murdered human being is willing to forgive the murderer. I thought that was very strange and also very telling. Because in the United States, it is the oppressor, the oppressed who has to do the forgiving, never the oppressor who is told they need to change. And what we have seen in the last 4 years, and what we're even seeing in the last few days as we're waiting for these election results to come in, speaks to that. Now, as a white person, I've never been in a situation where I've had to look at an entire race of people and say, you know what, your people committed terrible atrocities against mine for centuries, and I'm going to find a way to move forward with you peacefully anyway. I've never had to do that, so I can't speak to what that would feel like. But what I can say is for the last few years, I have seen people that tell me they love me support a person and support policies that will actively hurt me, and by extension hurt my son. And it's been hard to know what to do with that, because I'm the one who's being expected to forgive, or not even forgive because they don't think they did anything wrong, but just to forget and move forward and say it's just politics. It's not just politics. This is life and death for a lot of people. This is people saying the person you're supporting will kill me, and you're doing it anyway. And being told, well, that might be true, but can you find it in your heart to forgive them? Can you find it in your heart to make space for differences and just move forward? And here's the thing, I'm willing to make space for differences. I should not be asked to make space for being dehumanized or to make space for the dehumanization of others. I should not be asked to do that. And I feel that that is what people are asking for. We have just endured 4 years of an administration that has no problem whatsoever dehumanizing anybody who dares to disagree with Donald Trump. Even Donald Trump himself makes no pretense about it. He is not a president for all people. He is a president for people who support him. And being asked to overlook that, being asked to forget that there are people in my life, in your life, in lots of people's lives who've looked at that and said, that's fine with me, because as long as I get what I want, I don't care what happens to you. Being told that you need to forgive and forget that is a huge thing to ask of someone. So I don't know what we do with that. I really don't. I don't know how we look at the people in our lives who supported this and forget that for 4 years they not only allowed this man to do this and never held him accountable for it, they applauded it. They were happy about it. I remember during the March for Families, or after the March for Families, I had a conversation with someone of that mindset. And I pointed out, the families coming here aren't breaking the law. They're seeking asylum, and they're allowed to do that legally. And their response was, well, for now. And I'm like, now hold up. I thought you were the pro-life party. I thought you were people who would be excited to help, quote, the least of these. And now you're saying that, you're hoping that that becomes illegal? And this is what we've been dealing with for the last several years. So again, I ask, how do you move past that? Because I really don't know. Regardless of who wins this election, how do we move forward? And I'm not talking about as an entire country. I'm talking about in our personal everyday lives. How do we move forward with these people after they've shown us exactly who they are? I don't know what the answer is to that. I wish I did, but I don't. If you have the answer, I'd love to know. So that's where I am today. I mean, I'm in a place of recognizing that I have a tremendous amount of privilege to have never been this afraid about an election before. I'm in a place of recognizing that, forgive and forget is not the virtue it's made out to be. And maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe this whole idea of forgive and forget is nonsense and always has been. And it's easy to not realize that until you're the one who's being asked to forgive and forget an atrocity committed against you. So I'd like to hear from other white people out there. I know that a lot of us have been very afraid this election? How does it feel to have it be, you know, for the first time in your life, have to truly be afraid? I shouldn't say I just want to hear from white people. I want to hear from white, straight, cisgender white people. Because a lot of you are, for the first time ever, feeling afraid about the outcome of this election. How does that feel to know that there are marginalized people who feel this way every election, and you're just getting a taste of what life is like, and not only what life is like, but that this is just an ordinary way to feel for some people. This fear is just part of the democratic process for them, unfortunately. Because for me, it has been very sobering to have that realization that, wow, I have really lived such a privileged life. I have never had to worry that my humanity is going to be up for debate depending on who wins an election. And that's just mind-blowing to me, that I have lived this long without that fear. And that, if we're being honest, after this election, you know, if Joe Biden wins, which it looks like he will, the level of fear that I'm going to feel living in this country is going to be reduced dramatically. Not so for a whole lot of other people. And that is something that really is very unsettling to realize. Because it shouldn't be this way. But it is this way, and has been this way for a very long time. We have to get past saying this is not who we are, because no, this is exactly who we are. And this is who we've actively chosen to be since the beginning. And if we want to move forward into all of this, you know, a more equitable country, as a lot of people say they want, we have to acknowledge that this country has not been fair, has not been free, has not been equitable for a lot of people. We have to acknowledge that right now, as I'm speaking to you, there are same-sex couples who are trying to draw up legal documents regarding their marriage and what is to be done in the event that their marriage is dissolved by the U.S. Supreme Court. That's the reality of it. We are in a precarious position, but a lot of us have never had to think about it before. And a lot of us have spent the last few years waking up to the fact that we have a lot of privilege. And we have spent the last few years watching people we love try to take everything, not just from us, but from other people. And we're being told to forgive and forget. And all of this comes down to, how do we move forward? What do we do from this point, knowing what we know now? Now, 4 years ago, maybe you could argue that the people who voted for him just didn't know any better. They didn't know what he was going to be like as president. They were taking a chance. They wanted to change. So they voted for somebody who wasn't a politician, thinking that he might be the best choice because he's not a politician. He'll save the day. 4 years later, we know better. We have over 230,000 people dead from a virus that got out of control because he didn't do his job. We have, I believe as of today, 34 transgender and gender non-conforming people who have been murdered in the United States simply for being transgender or gender non-conforming. We have a huge problem with police brutality in this country, and the people who pay the price for that are typically Black Americans, unarmed, complying Black Americans who are being shot dead in the streets. And there are a lot of white Americans who are fine with that. And you'll say, well, no, they're not. Didn't you see the marches? Yeah, I saw the marches. And I also saw, last time I checked the numbers, about half the country saw all that too. And we're like, doesn't affect me. I don't care. We have to get over this idea of this is not who we are, because this is who we are. And we should be embarrassed that the presidential race is as close as it is, because this country was being asked to choose between a man who is admittedly problematic, but still a good and decent human being who I think wants to do the right thing and can be guided to do the right thing, and actually asks for help from others to do the right thing, and someone who has no regard whatsoever for doing what is right and good and honorable, and governs solely for his own benefit. And half the voters have said, you know what? That second guy, he sounds great. Let's give him 4 more years. 4 more years of that, please. We should be embarrassed that it's this close. I am embarrassed. The whole world is watching us because they know that what happens with this election affects them too. And it is embarrassing to have to say, yeah, so about half of our country is perfectly fine with a guy like that because they agree with him. He hates all the same people they do. And there will be people who will say, well, they didn't vote for Donald Trump because they're racist and transphobic and xenophobic and so on. Yes, they did. The first time around, maybe they had no excuse. This time, there is no excuse. They know exactly who he is, and they prefer him because he is a reflection of them. And I really don't know what to do with that. I will be right back with my finished look and some closing thoughts. All right, I'm back. So my final thoughts on this. I have so many thoughts. It's going to be hard to finalize them, but basically I'm just very disappointed in my country right now. I'm disappointed in the people, some of the people that I know. You know, the question of unity keeps coming up in various conversations across the interwebs. And unfortunately, I'm at a point where I just don't think that's possible. I cannot look past what I know. I cannot dismiss the lived experiences of other people. It is not my place to say that, you know, when somebody tells me what their lived experience is, it's not my place to say, well, what you're experiencing is not relevant because, you know, I believe this, this, and this. And I've seen a lot of that happening. I've seen a lot of people hear of the lived experiences of others, and because it's not their experience, they say it doesn't matter, and they vote accordingly. And that is part of the reason we are where we are today, because we have we have millions of people who have said the lived experiences of marginalized groups don't matter. They don't matter as much as my political agenda. The white evangelical church that I came from has made it very clear that their Christianity is less about following Christ and living as they believe he would have them live than it is about having political power. And they will deny it. They will say that I'm the one in error because I don't know Jesus. But here's the thing. I think that I do. And the thing that always comes to mind when someone when a white evangelical Christian tells me that I'm the problem because I don't know Jesus, I think about that scene in the movie The Matrix when they have to go rescue Morpheus, and Trinity wants to go, and Neo says that he doesn't want her there, and then Trinity tells him that she needs to go because she knows Morpheus and she believes that he means more to her than he does to Neo, and she's going. I can't remember the exact quote, but that's kind of how I feel toward evangelical Christians. It's like, yeah, I do know this Jesus, and I believe he means more to me than he does to you, and I believe you can go to hell. They have chosen to use Jesus as a political pawn, and we are all paying the price. They are the ones who helped Donald Trump get into office. They are the ones who are fighting desperately to keep him there, and I have lost all respect for their gospel. I have lost all respect for them as people. The mask has come off. We see them for exactly what they are. And they are people who care more about politics than they do about being the hands and feet of Jesus to the world, which is what I was always taught to do. So to see them behaving this way, I mean, it shouldn't come as a surprise to me, because I remember the church I grew up in being very politically active, and it was always stressed to us the importance of electing leaders that will advance the Christian agenda. And by the way, the whole thing about, you know, and Christians still talk about it today, white evangelical Christians do, about the quote gay agenda. There is no gay agenda. The ones who have the agenda, make no mistake about it, are white evangelical Christians, and we are seeing that play out in real time every day, and we have seen it play out in real time every day for the last 4 years, when they have turned a blind eye to every atrocity, turned a blind eye to every violation of the law. They are trying to delegitimize a legitimate election. And they'll say, well, you guys did Russia, Russia, Russia. Yeah, and you know what? The intelligence agencies said there was Russian interference in our elections. That is quite different than trying to invalidate votes just because the election is not going in your favor. So I don't know where we go from here. I don't know how we move forward. I do think that it's important for anybody for any white, straight, cisgender person who is experiencing panic to recognize the privilege that you have if this is the first time you've ever experienced panic during an election. And really ask yourself, what are you going to do with that? Because it's not enough to say, okay, now I have some idea of what it feels like to wonder if my humanity is up for debate. Okay, well, now you have some idea of what that feels like. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? Are you willing to call out your racist parents, your racist uncles, your racist siblings? Are you willing to take a stand at work when you see an injustice happening? Are you willing to be that voice that says this is not right and step into the fray? It's one thing to call yourself an ally. By the way, we don't get to decide that we're allies. People we say we're an ally for, they're the ones that decide if we're an ally. We don't get to declare that for ourselves. But if you're an ally, consider becoming an accomplice. Consider being willing to get in there and get your hands dirty. Being willing to, be willing to make good trouble. Be willing to be the one that's taken away in cuffs if necessary, to stand up for what is right. I just feel like we're in a very dangerous and precarious place. And I also recognize that there are people who have felt like this every election since the beginning. And I'm only just getting a taste of what they've experienced their entire lives. And I want to use that privilege well. And I hope that I am. And I hope that you will too. Whatever happens, we're going to get through it. How we're going to get through it, I don't know yet, but I know we will. And I don't know what our country is going to look like on the other side of all this, but there's work to be done. And part of that is beginning with the truth of who we are. We've got to stop saying this is not who we are. The truth of how we got here. We have to acknowledge the racist roots of this country and what has grown from them. Because if we don't do that, all of the talk in the world about equity and making this country truly free for everyone who calls it home, that's all just kind of bullshit if we're not willing to acknowledge that. So, something to think about. Anyway, those are my thoughts for this 2020 election. I'm stressed out and I'm tired, and also incredibly privileged to have come this far in my life and only now getting stressed out and tired over an election. Yeah, that's a sobering reality. Anyway, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you for sitting with me and listening to me ramble on and on. I'm sorry I did that, but I had a lot to say. We'll see what happens. Be good to yourself. Be kind to yourself today. Do something nice for yourself. Be kind to other people. This is a stressful time for a lot of people. And go out and do something good in the world. Make the world better. Leave the world better than you found it. Leave the place you're in better than you found it. We're going to get through this. We're going to be okay. But we are in for a ride, so buckle up. I will talk to you again soon. Bye.